So this morning, we're going to be just talking about some of the latest research and information that's out there, but also how COVID relates to human milk. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the journey of mom and her milk production, and then how the symphony that you guys already have, how that's going to help that mom, especially today with the stresses that moms are under. So these are the objectives. Based on the fact that we're in the middle of this national pandemic and a lot of people are saying there's going to be a second round, we want to make sure that the information we convey is not based on a reaction or fear, but it is based on information and studies, anything that we currently have that's already been done from a clinical basis. And then, like I said, milk production journey. This is something you already know, you've heard this. This is not new, enlightening information, but it may be something you haven't heard in the same way. So we just want to cover that. And then, of course, we want to talk about how we can preserve your breastfeeding rates that you guys have been doing so well on. But we're hearing some things nationwide that COVID-19 has caused a little dip in breastfeeding rates across the nation. So I like to hear what's happening at each of my facilities to see kind of what's happening here in the South, how that might be different.
What do you think? What do you think?
We haven't had a, our rates are kind of on the lower end and they've been steady. So in conclusion, I don't think we're seeing a dip, not yet. Retrospectively, we might look back and say, oh yeah,
Right.
But I wouldn't say that it's any different than our numbers are about the same.
Yeah, I agree.
So I've heard about 50-50 on that. A lot of folks are saying that because there has not been the prenatal classes, that moms have not been as prepared and therefore have not had some of the successes.
Well, so here's the thing I must tell you about us. We have that problem, period, whether we have class or not. And so that's probably why we don't see a dip. I'd be interested to know places where they had high numbers. Are they the people that are seeing the drop? Because
they are.
What I know about, in spite of, we didn't have a strong prenatal piece, we didn't have that anyway.
Okay.
So we had community class, but that was only catching, a small percentage.
Right.
And so to me, it makes sense what I've observed looking at the numbers that we have not seen a dip. And I'm not saying we won't retrospectively say, well, we did have a little one, but I'm curious as to whether the folks that are reporting a dip are the people who had high numbers. Like I'm talking in the 70s.
Yes. And I'm going to say
that's
yes.
What I
it is
would
those
expect.
that have 70 plus as their initiation percentage. That we are finding that they've had a dip because they did have attendance. They have not been able, and the word of the year is pivot. They have not been able to pivot to telehealth for the classes, the online classes. And the thing about it is the components of the Affordable Care Act that were developed around human milk and breastfeeding are still in play.
Yes.
And so you have 6 consults, which means one of those can be a breastfeeding class. Doing it with telehealth, you can bill and you get paid by the insurance companies for that.
Right.
And with telehealth, it could be recorded, and then you just open it up at the end for questions. It doesn't have to be that necessarily that ongoing.
See, we were switching ours anyway because we were doing in person and we were looking for funding for the whole. And so we're changing. Ours is about to go back up and it's going to be on an electronic platform.
Okay.
But then when we can do it in person, we will. But a lot of people, that is not what they are happy to do it in the Hollywood Squares fashion.
Well, they are. And again, we're talking about a different generation of mom that is more accustomed to electronic type of learning.
But you got to have all the options.
You do have to have all the, I agree with that. And so just also know Medela has maintained our Breastfeeding University, which is 10 modules. Moms go online, they sign up for it. It's a $25 donation to Ronald McDonald House. They get the 10 modules. It's either in English or Spanish. And then they can view all those modules for up to 1 year. So if they heard something about engorgement, but in the very beginning, they're prenatal, they're like, oh, okay, I don't want to get to that until all of a sudden it happens, right? Then they want to go to that module. So they can go back and forth on these modules. It is available, and it is something, right now we don't have it so that it can be customized to each location, but we can sell it in bulk so that it can be used as your education if you want it for the breastfeeding piece. So if that's something you want to review and see if it's something your facility would like to do, let me know. I'll get you a code so you can actually review it and decide. I have presented to corporate to please allow that to be customized, take the Medela name off of it and just make it a more generalized.
Kind of like what some of the, like Enjoy and those people.
Exactly. It's manufacturers are not accustomed to not having their name on stuff, so it is something they are reviewing.
And they don't like that having their name
Well,
on things.
the thing is, we're known, as that yellow company, right? It's the gold standard is human milk, so just having the yellow all over it would probably be enough recognition. But anyway, they're reviewing it as they are wont to do. When it comes to the latest information, that is not included in Breastfeeding University, where we don't talk about COVID-19. That's still just so new and changing quite frequently. But way back in the end of July, we got a group of folks globally together to understand what was happening around the world, to see if things are consistent when it comes to human milk. And what we were finding then is what we're continuing to find. So we may have suspected then that human milk would not be any detriment for the babies if mom had COVID-19. And that it would be even better if baby had been diagnosed with COVID-19, that we need to have that human milk in that baby. There were questions around donor milk. And what we found is they're not going to be the same antibodies as direct from mother to baby, her own baby. However, breast milk is still superior to formula for any baby that's compromised or completely term healthy and wonderful. What we have found from this group is that there was the desire from professionals around the globe to learn more. So that's why we've done the webinars, and you'll recognize some of these names. If you go to medelaeducation.com, you'll see a lot of these names where we've already done the webinars with them. The presence of the SARS-CoV-2 is rare in breast milk. It's not a zero, but it is rare that it is transmitted. But when we tested the breast milk samples, we found robust antibodies present. So mom's body is reacting to what is out there. Encouraging that mom and baby skin to skin is going to be helpful to produce these antibodies. As much contact as mom can make. So that's where it's extremely important. We have, it's even more important, like I've been saying, to have that contact when it comes to breast milk, but it has affected breastfeeding practices, and just like we just talked about, nationwide there have been some issues. Part of the issue is that when we've got the stress on the staff, there are smaller hospitals that took their RN IV CLCs and stopped them doing lactation and had them just on the floor as nursing.
Yeah.
And so that then was a problem. The other problem was even moms didn't want a whole lot of interaction with staff. So they were not encouraging staff to come in and do a lot of consults. But the other thing is in a lot of places they were sending them home as early as 6 hours, but definitely under 24. And so there was no time for education. And again, if they weren't getting prenatal education, they don't have the time to get it when they're inpatient. So then we talk about going back to the internet. There's so much information out there. A lot of it misinformation. So that's why we're seeing a problem with that. But then also, it related in a domino effect to the satisfaction surveys. Moms were dissatisfied that they didn't get enough information, even though they may have agreed that they wanted to go home sooner, to be out of a healthcare setting, but they still wanted the information that they didn't get. So it's a big it's a big mess. we're all just in the middle of the big mess. So, moms being able to start on the right technology, we do know it's helpful. We do know that they're going to get off to the right start with the right product here in your facility that you guys chose years ago. So we already know this, cornerstone of survival, human milk. So CDC, UNICEF, AAP, everybody agrees 100% that human milk is preferred over formula, especially right now. There, again, no evidence that SARS-CoV-2 is transmitted through breast milk, and high evidence of antibodies present. We have the webinar series, as I mentioned, and you guys now have a copy of the links to that, so that you guys can go in and view any of those. Okay, milk production journey. This, again, this is, I'm not trying to tell you something you don't already know, but I just want to kind of bring things top of mind. As before, the journey of the milk production really begins in the first golden hour. We've all heard it. The goal at most facilities is to have baby latch within the first 6 hours. That's like the first goal, the first stepping stone. And then have them inch down as close as we can to that golden hour while baby is awake and alert.
Mm-hmm.
What also needs to increase is the interaction with labor and delivery when it comes to that first latch. Rather than moving them on to the postpartum floor, getting that first latch in labor and delivery, no matter whether they've had a C-section or not, let's get that baby to the breast. Because that's when milk production truly begins. And it takes more than just hand expression. Hand expression is beautiful because these are always with us. But it doesn't truly mimic a healthy newborn. They provide vacuum at the breast. So the substitute when baby is not having a good latch, or when baby has to be taken to the NICU, or baby has an anomaly and can't latch well, mom needs to use a pump in that first golden hour, or within those 6 hours, if that's your first goal, in place of baby if baby doesn't have a good latch or baby is not there. So that means maybe some extra education in labor and delivery to understand what is a good latch. What are we looking for as this baby has just been delivered, and taking that time. The other thing is having the equipment and having the kits available so that labor and delivery, who has a long list of things to do, they don't have to go searching for things. And I understand here you guys are well equipped, you have the products, you have the kits, and you've educated the staff. So I don't see it so much as a problem here as it is trying to narrow down that window to make sure that baby is getting that good latch or that a pump is used in its place. Mm-hmm. So what happens when we get that good latch? Initiation is about activating the milk producing cells, those lactocytes. If mom is having challenges with initiation, intervention is what is key. If we don't intervene, we're going to have irreversible low milk volume. What happens in the first few hours and days matters for the lifetime of breastfeeding. When we talk about preterm infants, their needs of intake are lower than a term infant. But mom's body needs to produce as if baby was healthy and term, so that when baby is up to full feeds, that mom has the full supply. That's why it's very key making sure that breastfeeding or pumping is occurring every 2 to 3 hours. Not this 8 to 10 times a day over a 24-hour period, but really every 2 to 3 hours. And it needs to be encouraged by all staff. Have you breastfed? When was the last time you breastfed? Mm-hmm. Oh, your baby's in the NICU. Have you pumped? When was the last time you pumped? It's probably time to pump again. And yes, you may not be seeing a whole lot yet. We're trying to get everything in the backstory started so that you will have the supply that you need when the baby needs it.
So
yes.
the Q2 is for NICU babies?
The Q2.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pumping every 2 hours. Not for babies who are with their mothers.
So term infants, Yes, we want them feeding on demand, but we're watching for them wanting to feed about every 2 to 3 hours. That baby should be waking up,
Because-
but they don't always.
And that's not what, term babies, and up here, we have a broad thing of term baby. We've got,
Right.
we get 34 weekers up here, and they're not term, but they're up here. So-
Yeah.
They're preterm.
But for infants who are 38
Right.
and 6 plus, we do not do timing. We just, because what we teach is that the infant will have, you maximize what you're talking about in L&D, get
Right.
them going, and if they have, because some of them have difficulty, then maybe, and then we really do usually encourage the mother to do hand expression while still watching, because an infant who is term he needs to eat when they're ready to eat.
Cue-based,
Yes,
absolutely,
and so that's why I asked that, because it's, for the preterm infants, when
Yes.
you're getting off initiating
Yes.
lactation, but for people who have their baby up here,
Right.
we kind of customize it a little bit. I mean,
That's perfect.
we don't have, because you don't want the mother with the baby in there paying more attention to the pump than she is to
We
the
don't.
baby.
Yeah.
We don't,
Yeah.
that mom should not even know the pump is in the room until someone has identified that a pump needs to be used, okay?
Yeah, we don't
So-
usually even put them in there.
Exactly.
Right.
I agree with that 100%. I have a lot of places that want a pump in every room. It's like,
We don't have room for
No.
that in our.
but we don't want to send that message.
Mhm.
We
Right.
want the baby with mom,
Right.
and we want mom
No,
watching
yeah,
the baby
it's
for
just
the
that
cues.
when you were talking about that, I knew it was for preemies, but I thought, I didn't know
No,
what
it's,
you were
yeah, we're
saying
talking
for-
about the
Because
preterm.
preemies, yes.
We're talking about the preterm.
When there's no,
and
when there's no baby there.
when there's no
Right.
baby there.
Right.
Yes, so thank you for making sure, because I do need to make sure that is clarified in my notes, that I do say that, because this does go to a broad range of attendees. So, absolutely, preterm, we're trying to encourage pumping when baby is not able to nurse well
And
or
so,
in NICU.
having said that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about somebody I just talked to this week. But if we get 34 weekers up here,
Yes.
sometimes 35, some of them, they all act the same. Those mothers need to be pumping too.
They do,
Because those babies are not going to feed well because
They are
they're
not.
not physiologically able.
At that
So,
point, yeah.
yeah, so
correct.
that's, if there could be a baby up here, but if it's a baby that fits into one of those categories, it just isn't feeding well, then
they are
The mother-
preterm. And
They are
they
preterm.
are preterm, and moms need to remember that. They may look
the mom's.
like a term baby, but they don't
They
act
don't, no.
like a term
No,
baby.
they
They do
can't.
not have the functionality. That is exactly right. So we do want to make sure that they are encouraged. Hand massage, we know, has a great impact on that milk supply. Even when they're breastfeeding and seemingly it's going well, hand massage does help. So, okay. Critical window post-birth, I already talked about that. How do we close that gap and preserve the milk supply? Getting that pump used when there is medical separation. And what are we looking for in milk volumes? And it's somewhere around 500 mLs in the first 2 to 4 weeks on average.
We say like 10 days, 500 by 10 days.
Yes.
The baby's life. I mean, that's what we tell the mothers, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Something to aim for.
Exactly, and that's what the science tells us, that they should be aiming for. So what we're trying to do here, when it comes to establishing lactation and maintaining it, we're looking at the first month, and we have targets. These are not necessarily averages or expectations, but we have targets. So we're looking in the first few days for 100 mLs, and then, my opinion, by the end of the first week, 500 is high.
That's high.
That sounds high to me.
That's real
It's a
high.
real
Especially
high
for a
target.
G1.
I didn't write the slides.
I like 10 days. It's
I
more-
like 10
it's
days.
better.
I like 10 days. And then after 2 weeks, 700 mLs is again, and this is again, when do we have frequent milk removal? We're talking about maintaining lactation supply when there has been an intervention needed. Okay, how do you guys help? We've already talked about this. Prioritizing getting that baby to the breast early and often. And if baby does not have a good first latch or is separated from mom, she needs to pump early and often. Not all pumps are the same. And so there's a whole lot of misinformation right now in the world where manufacturers try and always, pose their products in the best light. They don't always have science behind how they pose their
Who needs
products.
science? We don't need it.
But when it comes to the Symphony Plus, it has been determined by the industry as being a hospital grade pump. Hospital grade for the industry means it meets your UL guidelines for the hospital. It means that there's no risk of cross-contamination and can be safely used by mother, by mother, by mother, by mother, by mother. And then it can be used 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, ongoing, because it's a more robustly developed product. Okay, it's intended to be used all the time, often, and safely by multiple mothers. So, what we have done is we looked at the science first. What does a healthy term baby do? That's how then we produced our product to meet what does that healthy baby do. You guys upgraded to the Plus technology a few years ago, and so it's designed, yes, as a multi-user pump, but it has that initiation technology that is intended for those first few days of life till mom moves to lactogenesis 2. Then mom goes into the maintenance pattern for the rest of the time that she needs to use a pump. So who should use the Symphony Plus? We already talked about this a little bit, but a couple of the things that some folks forget about are the risk factors. And a first-time mom is technically a risk factor because she's unsure about what she's doing. Short-term mother and baby separation, sometimes that's forgotten. It's like, oh, well, you'll get your baby back in a few hours. It's like, let's not miss our window. And then pump-dependent moms who either choose that they wish to only pump, or those that have the preterm or ill infants. And then the mothers with risk factors like I said, the first having their first child, but over 30 is now a risk factor. It used to be over 40.
So bizarro.
It sounds like it to me too, but our
Bizarro.
human bodies were intended to have our babies earlier. And I think our knees and backs tell us that.
Geriatric.
Yeah, that's what I had 2 geriatric babies.
I was 34,
Me too.
I know. But we didn't know, what does it mean by risk factor? It's a risk factor to lactogenesis being in a timely fashion. So it could have delayed lactogenesis. Of course, obesity, high blood pressure. I mean, there's a lot of things that we need to just make sure we're looking at that chart as we're going in to see that mom, to be able to give her true expectations. She's going to, in the end, get better results because we're being honest. You know, this is, your BMI is a little high. It's a lot high. Or, you know, we noticed that you had, you know, gestational diabetes. Let's talk about, you know, perhaps you may have had some diabetes, a little bit of factors before that, but just things we need to look at. And I don't even think obese really get into this either.
I don't know
Moms,
anybody that tells a mom, your milk supply you may have a delay because you're BM. I don't ever say that.
You don't think about it, but here's
No,
the
I think about it all the time. I never say it though, but I blend it in. What I encourage is blend it in to the care and the education, because
Right.
it's not, the mother cannot conceptualize those things that you're taught. They can't even conceptualize you lost a lot of blood and that can delay life.
Yes.
So while the person who's helping the mom needs to be aware that
Right.
can be, and you know,
Yes.
and out here, any of those factors. So you just teach up here
Right.
so that the mother considers all, because I just would not discuss with the mother any risk factors.
Well, and here's
Unless they're like maybe what do you call it? When you have to go to the survey over here, what's that called? Help me, you guys. Dr. Survey.
Oh, the repro endo.
Endo, yeah. When you,
Okay.
you know, when you have trouble with some
Yes.
of these,
Reproduction or
yeah, when you have
Yes.
trouble with some of the endocrine issues that
Yes.
I might discuss, but the other ones, the mother would just go, what? And then I think these modern ladies, I think it would just shut them down. I mean,
Well, and I can tell you that every woman who's been pregnant believes she has high BMI, right? Because she's like larger than she's ever been, but it's with the baby. But to say your estrogen levels may not
different. Than,
drop as quickly based on, you know, the information I see about you today or what we're finding these days, is that there may be a delay. So we need to make sure that we're on top of this.
and here's what we do.
And here's what we do. Exactly. finding your voice for that mom and
Right.
customizing it is perfect, but understanding the risk factors so mom has realistic goals and expectations. And of course, short hospital stays. Many states still, like I said, have moms going home extremely early. And then of course, mom's expectation and understanding when she's been discharged, lactogenesis 2 should be occurring between day 4 and day 7. If they're not seeing a change in their milk volume, that's a red flag, that they just need to have a chat with lactation. We already talked about this, and then one other thing was, of course, the unplanned cesarean section. What are we trying to achieve with Medela's initiation technology? The studies.
Oh, that's a cool.
Isn't it? So what it's showing us is that through the studies, moms are able to get 50% more milk than when they were using the previous Medela products. We're always going against what were the gold standards and before we change any of our products around. So what do we look at? We look at your ultimate systematic reviews, the randomized controlled studies, the cohort studies, but this is kind of where the levels are. It's not to say that editorials and expert opinions aren't valued, but if there's not clinical evidence, that's what's really gonna elevate that study. And so when we did look at the research, we began actually with University of Western Australia, who looked at what do babies do? What is happening with that healthy term infant and mom who has an established milk supply? What did they do? And that was what created the symphony in the very beginning. And then that was followed up by research done at Rush Hospital about this is what the science found with the baby. We've produced a product. Is it now efficient and effective based on that science? And then that study showed, yes, indeed, it is efficient and effective. It's working better than what was the gold standard for breast pumps at that time. Mm-hmm. So anyone that's new to the industry does not know the term classic breast pump. That's the original breast pump Medela had. That was considered the gold standard because that was the only previously studied breast pump. So in the 1950s, there was a breast pump that came out and a study done with a couple of engineers. Ole Larson, at the beginning, the founder of Medela is the one who did that study. And then there was a gap of about 40 years where there were no other studies done, right? So when the other studies started to be done, we looked at the gold standard. And I can tell you there are other hospitals on the market today that still base their technology on the 1950s study and have not progressed in theirs to any additional studies. So it's great that you guys have the Medela. You've got the one with the latest research.
Well, ours all have the plus, right? We put it in all.
They all have plus. I do recommend that if your pump does not say that it has initiation technology, that it doesn't have the sticker on the front.
We did them all.
We did.
Yeah, and I did some more. We did a second round of them. I just wanted to make sure that's what you're talking about.
That's exactly, well, now I'm gonna be talking about the plus technology. So the pumps that you have, if you ever have one in your hospital that shows up without a sticker on the front, that means that one we had previously upgraded, died, got crushed by a bed, something happened, and it went back to us never to be seen again.
Okay.
And we've shipped you a replacement, okay? So we need to make sure the replacement has been upgraded, okay? But all the pumps have the original information. But what happened was folks kept telling us, but newborns don't act like that healthy term infant after that milk supply has been established. Mm-hmm. And so that's when Rush Hospital began to look again. But what they did, because they needed a captured audience over a good amount of time, is they looked at moms with very low birth weight babies. They looked at 105 moms over a 14-day period, and they said, what we're gonna have you do is some group of you is going to be in that gold standard pattern, and then another group of you is gonna have a combination of patterns. And something that acts like that newborn, and this is a healthy newborn at the breast, And then those, once your milk supply has been established, we're gonna switch you over to that maintenance pattern, right? That pattern that's always been in there. That resulted in some excellent information. The next study came out a few years after that study. So Symphony came out, believe it or not, the original one came out in 2001. It's been around. But it wasn't until 2012 that we looked at this initiation pattern. And then a few years after that, because that study was only done on moms of very low birth weight babies, another study was done of moms who had had babies term, but had had either a cardiac anomaly or cardiac disease. So that it's like, okay, so now let's look at mom's body having a term infant. The results that they found were the same. And then another study came out a few years after that where they looked at preterm, term, and late preterm. And see, all right, how does that look? And again, results essentially were the same. So we'll go over those real quick. What do we start with? We start with the gold standard. What is a healthy baby doing at the breast? What was that output? Which was around 700 mLs by day 14. I've already explained in the first double-blinded randomized study that was done at Rush. The first group was a maintenance only pattern. The second group did initiation plus maintenance. Their milk output, that orange line, is right up there with that healthy term infant. So that means mom's producing enough milk for when that baby's discharged from the NICU and is at full feed. So mom is not shy on her milk production. The next study that I mentioned with the babies that had cardiac issues. Again, gold standard healthy baby, results basically the same as that first study when using the initiation plus maintenance. And then the third study this is an observational study by post, and what it did the same thing, grouping the two moms. Maintenance only pattern actually had a little bit better results than the first study, and even better results when they did the combination of the two programs. So what does this mean for your staff here? Every single inpatient mom who is using this breast pump needs to push the button with the milk droplets on it after they push the on button. Every single time mom is pumping until she reaches lactogenesis 2. That's when NICU is identifying mom has had a change in her milk volume. Because you rarely have a mom who reaches lactogenesis 2 on a healthy mother-baby floor. Okay, so normally she's gone in 24 to 48 hours. If she is staying long enough for about 5 days, you may see a milk volume change, in which case you are advising them to only push the on button. So basically every mom inpatient is the easiest way to remember this. And then your moms that have a change in milk volume 3 consecutive